Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One, I want to raise my voice in support of the ranking member's amendment and take careful note when you're speaking of consumer protection, how you can set up an agency that ultimately is given huge discretionary authority to ban and ration credit products that consumers want, to take away from consumers their choices and call that consumer protection. Frankly, that is beyond me. Now, the gentleman says in historic experience this hasn't been done before, but with all due respect to the chairman of the committee and other members, we've heard similar language from people who said Fannie and Freddie didn't present a systemic risk. There'll never be a taxpayer bailout of Fannie and Freddie. Does it mean that people were ill-intentioned, but unfortunately they were wrong? And you very well, Mr. Chairman, could be wrong on this. We don't know how this incredible sweeping power could be used. And so many of us believe, again, this is adding entire new levels of discretionary federal power totally over and above what we have in existing law, over and above the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the Fair Housing Act, the Civil Rights Act, the Truth in Lending Act, the Fair Credit Billing Act, the Consumer Leasing Act, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the Electronic Fund Transfer Act. So we believe that ultimately consumers need to be protected from force. They need to be protected from fraud. They need to be protected from deception. They don't need to be protected from individual freedom and opportunity to find the credit products that are best for them. Ultimately, we are setting up a huge new expensive bureaucracy that could cost $750 million, as I read the underlying legislation, to unleash a whole new army of bureaucrats to decide whether or not or which credit cards we can carry in our wallets, what mortgages we can have for our homes, what type of credit lines could we have for our small businesses. I mean, nothing to me could be a greater assault upon consumer rights than to make credit more expensive, less available, and to take away consumer choice. And yet we see that's exactly what's happening in the underlying bill. The best way to promote consumer protection is to promote competitive markets with effective disclosure written in English and to protect consumers against force and fraud. And what we saw is that in the economic crisis, there was only one consumer product that was even remotely involved in the economic turmoil, and that was subprime lending. And we know there's a complete separate title in this bill on subprime lending. And yet, this particular title will take in a huge swath of businesses, potentially auto dealers, retailers who have in-store credit, credit counselors, all types of products, services, people throughout the entire economy that had absolutely, again, nothing to do with the economic turmoil. Which again kind of harkens back to the cynical statement of the President's Chief of Staff, never let a serious crisis go to waste. It allows you to do things that you could not do before. And so I reject the notion that the majority of this title is somehow going to increase consumer protection. Quite the opposite. It's going to erode consumer rights. It's going to make credit more expensive, less available, and ultimately hurt jobs. Hurt jobs in what is one of the most in one of the largest credit contractions that we have seen at a time when the nation's unemployment rate still hovers around double digits, when millions have lost their jobs even post the enactment of the stimulus program. We're going to give essentially this unelected credit czar the opportunity to take away consumer freedom and to cause credit to become more expensive and less available. Again, in my book, that doesn't do anything to increase consumer protection.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York.